Welcome to Mind Shield. We protect the mind and pursue the truth. Let's get started.
What you're about to see is a framework for understanding tech-enabled psychological abuse as a system, not as a random series of strange events. This presentation explores how coercive control can be built through digital surveillance, exposure of private data, predictive profiling, and targeted environmental manipulation. The central argument is simple. When enough personal information is harvested, and enough signals are manipulated around a person, the result can feel supernatural. But what appears supernatural may, in this model, be structured, engineered, and very human. Every modern life leaves a trail. Smart homes generate logs. Phones create location history. Cloud backups store passwords, notes, and private records. Social platforms preserve emotionally charged conversations and relationship maps. In this presentation, all of that becomes the raw material for a subject profile. Not because one dramatic breach happens all at once, but because a fragmented life can be quietly assembled from many ordinary systems. The target does not begin in a haunted house. The target begins in the digital world that the rest of us already live in. The first phase is subtle. It begins with small disruptions that are easy to dismiss. A lock behaves strangely. A phone alarm fails. Ads suddenly reflect highly personal anxieties. Music, sounds, or environmental cues seem to line up a little too closely with private emotional triggers. Each event, on its own, can be explained away. That is the trick. The goal in this phase is not to prove control. The goal is to create uncertainty. A person starts asking, was that a coincidence, sabotage, or something worse? The fog rolls in before the war is named. Then the pressure becomes personal. Private information returns to the target in distorted form. Details from therapy, relationships, arguments, passwords, routines, and vulnerabilities begin to echo back through anonymous texts, manipulated encounters, or staged social coincidences. This is the mirror effect. Stolen reality reflected back at the target in a way designed to collapse privacy and destabilize trust. The message is not just, "We know you." The message is, there is nowhere left that is yours. That is the psychological pivot, where ordinary harassment becomes coercive control. At the highest stage, the attacker tries to create the illusion of omniscience. Predictive models appear to anticipate routines. Arrivals seem too precise. Encounters feel too well timed. Audio anomalies, whispers, clicks, or synthetic feeling sounds may be interpreted as impossible forms of intrusion. The objective is to shrink the victim's world until every event feels connected, every movement feels observed, and every breath feels supervised. Once that illusion takes hold, the attacker no longer has to control reality completely. They only have to control enough of it to make the target feel cursed. But behind the illusion is an engine. On one side are inputs, location data, wireless probes, breached records, open source intelligence, microphones, and device exhaust. In the middle is processing, organizing massive data sets, building profiles, predicting behavior, and automating responses. On the other side are outputs, gaslighting, impersonation, targeted media, manipulated environmental cues, and possibly directed delivery systems. Strip away the myth, and the pattern becomes legible. What looks like telepathy may actually be reconnaissance, computation, and repeated weaponization. The magician survives by hiding the wiring. This deck frames that process as a kill chain. First comes selection and reconnaissance, then targeting and geolocation, then delivery, digital intrusion, environmental sabotage, psychological pressure, or other tailored interventions. And finally, assessment, collecting feedback, measuring reactions, and refining the next move. In plain English, this means the attack learns. The more a target reacts, the more data the system gains. The more data it gains, the more precisely the next pressure point can be chosen. That is what makes coercive control so adaptive, so invasive, and so difficult to explain from the inside. At this point, One of the most important distinctions must be made. Not everything the target feels comes from the same source. Some of it is imperfect memory under stress. Some of it is stolen reality. Real private data, real routines, real histories, real vulnerabilities used against the person. And some of it may be inserted experience, fabricated cues, simulated events, manipulated media, or engineered false context. If those categories are not separated, the victim becomes trapped in a knot of confusion. The first act of resistance is not revenge. It is a classification. This presentation also asks what kind of personality drives this behavior. The answer offered here is not genius. It is pathology, grandiosity, sadism, voyeurism, a dependence on domination. Historical precedents matter because they remind us that psychological destruction without visible bruises is not new. Systems have existed before that, sought to isolate, discredit, and break a target through surveillance, social pressure, and reality manipulation. The tools evolve, the appetite does not. Strip away the aesthetics, and the puppet master is often not a god at all, but a coward hiding behind systems. There is also a trap on the attacker's side. Domination behaves like addiction. The same level of control no longer suffices. Stronger effects are needed. Tighter timing, deeper invasions, more humiliating inputs, more complex methods. But every escalation increases operational risk. The bigger the system grows, the more traces it leaves. Logs, signals, traffic, hardware, collaborators, mistakes. Power intoxicates, then sloppiness creeps in. That is the paradox. The attack feels all-powerful to the target, precisely when it may be becoming most vulnerable to exposure. And so both sides are damaged. The victim's worldview narrows into survival thinking. Identity erodes. Sleep fractures. Isolation deepens, especially when institutions misread the event and fail to recognize the pattern being described. But the perpetrator also degrades. Moral decay accelerates. Reality distortion grows. Dependency on domination destroys empathy and judgment. The system poisons both ends of the wire. One life is cornered, the other is hollowed out. Abuse always makes this false bargain. One person suffers visibly, while the other rots invisibly. Either way, the human cost is total. Then comes the turning point. The freeze response has to give way to investigation. The illusion cracks when the target reframes the experience from supernatural terror into a documentable threat model. That does not mean the danger disappears. It means the narrative changes. The person is no longer facing an all-seeing demon. They are facing a human adversary with methods, constraints, blind spots, and dependencies. Fear thrives in mystery. Agency begins with measurement. The moment the victim stops asking, "Why me?" and starts asking, "How does this system work?" the balance shifts. From there, practical defense becomes possible. Reset devices, audit accounts, rotate credentials, remove old hardware, cut predictable patterns, use analog backups where necessary, shield or isolate sensitive electronics when testing interference hypotheses, seed uncertainty into compromised channels, break behavioral routines that feed predictive profiling. The point is not perfection, the point is friction. A hostile system depends on clean inputs, consistent routines, and uninterrupted access. Deny those things, and the attacker's confidence drops. Even a sophisticated machine starts coughing when you feed it static instead of rhythm. But technical defense is only half the battle. The self must also be reclaimed. That means separating your identity from the manipulative script imposed on you. It means refusing to let the attacker define your meaning, your guilt, your worth, or your future. It means finding support that understands the difference between trauma and confusion, between evidence and assumption, between collapse and recovery. Isolation is one of the attacker's greatest weapons. Breaking isolation is one of the target's greatest countermeasures. The soul of this fight is not just proving what happened. It is refusing to disappear. So the presentation ends where real cases begin, with evidence. Timestamp the anomalies. Log the locations. Track the device behavior. Preserve the network artifacts. Capture frequency data where appropriate. Maintain chain of custody. Correlate symptoms with time, place, hardware, and environmental conditions. Do not just describe the experience, structure it. Because the final message of this deck is clear. You are not fighting a god. You are fighting a system. And systems can be mapped. Systems can be disrupted. Systems can be exposed. Document the physics, preserve the logs, and reclaim your reality.